And now our first keynote invites us to see unity in diversity. How can Buddhist diversity be understood in unity rather than division, and as compassionate and skillful means rather than contradiction? We now invite Venerable Ngawang Tenzin to explore the topic of Ekayana, or one vehicle, celebrating complementarity across Buddhist traditions. Venerable Tenzin began as an ecologist studying the impacts of climate change on biodiversity. Now ordained as a monk in the Sakya Tibetan tradition, he has trained across Theravada, Zen, and Vajrayana traditions. A qualified martial artist and hatha yoga teacher, he now lives in Australia on the Dorrigo Plateau, where he is co-creating a community space for meditation, forest restoration, and nature connection. So if you're interested in learning more about the project, you can visit Gaia Forest website. Please join me in welcoming Venerable Tenzin.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of you once again for bringing your energy, your curiosity, your presence into this space, for offering this opportunity to share some reflections, something that is very dear to my heart, this topic, but also something that I'm aware, even as I come up to sit and to speak, that actually just looking around the room, or even in the first moments of this second day, let alone the first day of our gathering, we've already seen a beautiful demonstration of what I'm hoping to share a little about. This richness, diversity, but also this unity. So you've heard just a little bit about some of my background, some of the reasons for which I feel that this topic is worth speaking on, that I have had the good fortune, as have so many, to meet a lot of different Dharma streams. This great diversity of traditions that we have access to in this time and place, quite uniquely, I think, in terms of the history of Buddhism, or maybe even the history of spiritual traditions generally. I've actually, perhaps my first contact with the Dhamma was really through something quite aesthetic, in a sense. I came across the Japanese poetry, and also a very kind of practical application in natural farming, Japanese natural farming. And this was when I was in high school. And I don't really think I understood in any depth, but something resonated for me in what I came into contact with. And maybe that's an experience that others have shared, kind of an intuition rather than an intellectual understanding that drew you somehow to your first taste or touch with the Dharma. And I found, well, I was fortunate to come into contact with the Tibetan Vajrayana tradition and receive some clear and foundational meditation instruction. And by, through books, also the Plum Village tradition, many of us have come across the teachings of Zen Master, the late Thich Nhat Hanh, through his writings. And also the opportunity to study and immerse for a brief time in the Pa Auk tradition in Myanmar, Burmese forest tradition. And then in some ways, for me, somehow a confluence of some of those threads came with the meeting of a meditation master who was also following kind of a winding meditation path, maybe. And for me, maybe gave me something of a transmission of what I might call this Ekayana approach, like a one vehicle approach. And so coming back to these streams, these many streams in the Dharma, we, in this room, in the work that the Metta Center does, in a place like Sydney, in Australia, we have, it seems like access to maybe the full range of Dharma traditions. And this kind of inclusive vision that we see demonstrated by a Metta Center event like this, for me, really is quite unique, quite precious. And many have already spoken about this. And I just wanted to paint some images for us, if you will, like of just how broad that spectrum is. We can imagine like back to the very early phase of Buddhism in India, actually an aniconic phase, before there was even a Buddha image on the altar. Sometimes just an empty chair, sometimes a stupa, kind of a metaphor for the awakened mind itself, a physical symbol of that awakening. And then right through to the explosion of form and color in, for example, a Tibetan Thangka painting, a refuge tree. We have the image of the legendary Burmese monks and nuns capable of memorizing and reciting verbatim thousands of texts. And we have the Pure Land tradition where we are invited to consider awakening is possible just by reciting the name of a single Buddha. We have, and one of our presenters has shared about the image of the forest monk or nun, the mountain hermit practicing in solitude. And then we have the image of a Zen master at home in the world, literally returning to the marketplace with a smile, with open hands. We have the image of the charnel ground contemplation of impermanence as it manifests in our physical body at the end of our life. And then we have a visualization of infinite jeweled palaces that we find in texts like the Bodhisattva Charyavatara. We can find teachings that literally invite the reflection that all conditioned phenomena are of the nature of suffering. Teachings that all our experience is just mind. And even in the Vajrayana, we can say that all of our experience we can be invited to consider as divine wholeness. All this in the same Dharma ocean, yeah, these many, many streams. And maybe it's safe to say, and some of you had this experience also, that in our life, we have this very rare opportunity. In the past, maybe there was, if we were lucky, one teacher who was within a day's walk of where we lived, one teacher representing one school. And maybe we would have to walk a very long way. There's beautiful stories from the early texts of the incredible journeys that seekers underwent in order to find that teacher. But here, with the click of a button or a swipe on a screen, maybe we can access so many different teachings. So we can maybe say that finding a path has never been easier, but choosing which one to follow, maybe never trickier. So much is on offer for us. Maybe we can find ourselves expending some of our energy trying to differentiate which one is right, which one is wrong. Maybe we can find ourselves in some confusion or doubt about our practice. Maybe even we can be aware of unconscious need to justify our own practice by finding fault with another's practice, finding something wrong with someone else's practice. And actually, at various times in history, we know that even though the Buddha himself taught that the wise should not, first of all, be attached to view, and that the sage also avoids being entangled in debate, actually, debate was quite common. And actually, the stakes were quite high. In the early days of debate in the North Indian tradition, the loser kind of undertook to renounce their tradition, to convert to the school of the one considered victorious in the debate. The Buddha clearly was inviting us not to grasp at the teachings in this way. We have that image, the simile of the raft, yeah. The purpose of the raft is for crossing over to the other shore, not for the purpose of grasping onto, yeah. But still, it seems to have been such an important kind of thread, this thread of debate and discussion, that we've inherited these terms like Hinayana, Mahayana from that era, like this idea of a lesser and a greater vehicle. Quite ironic, no, for a system of thought founded on this idea of transcending hierarchy and of non-duality and interdependence. And we find a beautiful response to this, I think, in what is called the Rimé movement in Tibetan Buddhism. Rimé movement, one that is really seeking to value all of the teachings that are available, the various streams, just within the Tibetan Buddhist world, yeah. Working even to preserve traditions that otherwise were in danger of dying out, transmissions that were very rare, in danger of being lost. And trying to value them as just adding to the richness of the Dharma, yeah. And while we can see that within Tibet, even this debate tradition is maybe best preserved, at the same time you have this recognition of the importance of preserving different streams. So even within one kind of sub-school, the Madhyamika, there's a lot of debate, let alone between Madhyamika, Yogacara. This has in one sense helped, in some sense, especially in Tibetan tradition, to really hone the understanding of doctrine to like a razor's edge. But maybe we can also see it as tending towards splitting hairs if we look more broadly at all of these different streams, yeah. So this idea of Rimé, to look at all traditions as valuable, yeah, I think it's important for us to recognize, given the diversity of things that we have on offer today, to recognize that there is a way that we can look at such diversity that is helpful for us. It doesn't give rise to further confusion. And maybe even in our own life, where there's even wider range of doctrine than was available in medieval Tibet, we can see how important this question might be for us. Maybe even within our own family, we find ourselves spanning different cultural backgrounds, different Buddhist traditions, different spiritual traditions generally, let alone even in our own practice, where we might be meeting different teachers and attempting to make sense, to reconcile instructions that seem helpful, but maybe we encounter some contradiction. And I would like to add, and this is something that I will share on a little bit more, that maybe in our time, there's never been more urgency to this kind of question. We are facing collectively an ecological crisis, which some have called a crisis of separation, yeah, from the web of life. And where it feels like that tendency towards separation, towards division, discord, hatred are on the rise, and it's even being amplified and maybe even we can say monetized, and for people at a younger and younger age. So this antidote that I wanted to talk about, that we can consider, we can reflect on. This call to be even more inclusive. And I want to explore just one kind of inspiration and guide that I found in this. Just a single line was my stepping off point in the Lotus Sutra. It was paraphrased in the title of the talk, yeah. Nadva trini yanani kevalam ekayanam. There is only one vehicle, not two or three. Not a concept of Mahayana, Hinayana, but Ekayana, one vehicle, yana being vehicle, a mode of transport. It's a very famous sutra, foundational sutra for Chinese and Japanese Buddhism, especially some particular schools, but it's not limited to Lotus Sutra. We find echoes in Lankavatara for those scholars among us interested in such things. And it seems to be inviting us to this really expansive view of the Buddha Dharma, and indeed Buddhayana we can think of as a kind of a synonym for Ekayana, the Buddha vehicle. It's like a vision of these many streams like a delta, but all flowing into the same ocean. And I just want to say, I'm not going to pretend that this is not a thoroughgoing Mahayana text, yeah, that maybe in a kind of traditional reading, that Ekayana is kind of like my way is the highway kind of doctrine, yeah. But I want us to explore a broader reading of this Ekayana concept, yeah. And I have a sense that there's a lot to explore there, and I'll just be able to maybe share briefly about some of the things that I found interesting. And if we are skillful in the way we read, I think we can find it helpful for these questions that I'm posing. And indeed, this is exactly the way that we are invited to consider in the Lotus Sutra, that these many streams can be seen as one. And this is through skillful means itself, upaya. And I quote directly here: all the acts of a Buddha are always for one purpose. The Buddhas manifest their wisdom and insight solely to inspire sentient beings to enlightenment. O Shariputra, a Tathagata teaches sentient beings the Dharma only through the Buddha vehicle. There is no other, neither a second nor a third. The true nature of all the Buddhas of the 10 directions is exactly like this. Using incalculable and innumerable skillful means and various explanations and illustrations, these teachings were all for the sake of the single Buddha vehicle. And I don't think we need to confine ourselves just to Mahayana texts to find some of the seeds of this diversity. I think we can see right through the stratas or the early strata of the Pali Canon as well, the way that the Buddha taught to so many different seekers coming from so many different backgrounds, not just to bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, but to beggars, kings, to prostitutes and priests, to farmers, to warriors, to merchants, sages of other traditions, adapting each time the teachings to the specific conditions of the individual and relying on common sense and an invitation to direct experience each time. So I just wanted to, with the time remaining, just explore some of the ways maybe we can think to practice with this ekayana, some of the ways I'm finding helpful to look at this concept. And first of all, just as we can avoid the trap of being caught in view and caught in debate, I think we can think of these skillful means as ways to support us in our own practice, to seek to understand what our own individual conditions and causes are, what is our tendency, and be skillful in how we apply the teachings. This might, for example, be about cultivating some diligence, some faith, some willingness to continue, to stay with the practice, and to actually go deep enough to have some taste of clarity or ease, perhaps some calm, some benefit. And this in turn helps us to generate faith and to continue when times are difficult, when the practice becomes maybe dry or we are feeling lack of nourishment. We can have this trust to continue. And the teachers that I've found most helpful have been the ones who really encourage me to taste something of the fruit rather than this many wells that don't reach to the water. And trusting that if I do have some taste, some clarity, then through that, it will become easier to understand other different practices as also skillful means, because I will have seen through some of my own misunderstanding and have a clearer understanding of the teachings themselves. And in fact, the Lotus Sutra includes a really strong admonishment not to be disparaging of others' teachings. Yeah, we have the image of the Bodhisattva never disparaging, actually. The Saddha Paribhuta, always treating every person that they met with respect, remembering that they too have Buddha nature. And they experience a lot of ridicule and condemnation, but always responded by saying, I do not despise you, or you will become a Buddha. And one of my teachers also tells a very beautiful story about this, well, for me, this question, who is a bodhisattva? Who is a Buddha? We don't know. He tells a story of a Western practitioner who visited a very orthodox traditional temple in Myanmar. And maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of a little bit of cheekiness, asked the sayadaw, are you a arahant or a bodhisattva? And this sayadaw in a Theravadan tradition smiled and said, of course, I'm a bodhisattva. Of course. And for me, this invitation to see actually that at the heart, what matters is the heart. What matters is the motivation. And we don't know who is treading that path and in what way and what realization they may have attained. a motivation based on love and compassion. Maybe we can say based on kinship, based on this feeling of kinship. And in fact, in the Lotus Sutra, again, there is a beautiful passage, the teaching directed to Manjushri. And the Buddha says, in a future when the Dharma is in danger of being abandoned, the Bodhisattva, this awakening being, who knows who is a Bodhisattva? There may be many in this room. They should dwell somewhat aloof from worldly concerns, first of all. And how should they dwell? But they should dwell in love. They should awaken this thought of great kindness and great compassion. So in one reading, one way, we can see that maybe this one vehicle is none other than love. And maybe in the sense that each of the Brahma Viharas contains the others, these divine abodes, loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, and equanimity or inclusivity. Is this the vehicle? Is this the ekayana? And we do not need to seek far, of course, in the Pali Canon for this inspiration also. And indeed, metta is not just offered as kind of an advanced practice of immersion, but a preparatory practice, a condition for the mind that paves the way for calm, for ease, for insight, and as an antidote to fear, such a pernicious trend in our time, anxiety, fear. So ekayana, maybe Bob Marley gets a cameo here. Yeah, one love, maybe. This is a question I want us to ask. Ekayana. And my attention is drawn here also to a very powerful simile that's used in the Lotus Sutra to illustrate these upaya, these skillful means. And this is the simile of the burning house. Maybe some of you have come across this already. The image is of a wealthy man's house on fire, and inside his children are still playing. They're oblivious to the danger, playing with their favorite toys. And I'm, of course, paraphrasing here, but in order to encourage the children to leave this burning house, leave the danger, he tells them that there are even more beautiful toys outside, each according to their tendencies. And once they come outside, they find that there's just one toy, a beautiful jeweled vehicle, actually, this ekayana. And we are invited to consider that all of these different teachings that we have, they are like these skillful means offered to get us out of this burning house. This fire is the fire of birth, of old age, of illness, of death, of anxiety, of sorrow, suffering, distress, delusion. 3 poisons. And these teachings are leading and inspiring us to find the way out. And well, we gave Bob Marley a cameo. Why not Peter Garrett as well? So I want us to consider this last kind of part. I want us to consider maybe it's not just the house on fire, not just the bed, but the world is on fire. Yeah, and this image is one we find also in a very famous early sutta, the image of the world is burning also. And in our time, I don't think we need to have too much imagination to see how important it is for us to consider how we are also turning up the heat on ourselves, yeah? And maybe we can also consider that this ekayana is also one planet, not just one vehicle, one love, but one planet, this spaceship Earth, this image that I can come to in this exploration. And it's no accident that the late Joanna Macy, environmental activist and a teacher of the deep ecology process that we know as the work that reconnects, her thesis, her dissertation was on Paticca Samutpada, the content of the teaching on this burning world, the chain of interdependent co-arising. And she taught that in our time, we cannot afford anymore to ignore the interconnectedness of life. That as humans on this one planet, we cannot see our own well-being as separate from the well-being of other species anymore. from the integrity or the wholeness of this interconnected web. And again, the Lotus Sutra doesn't let us down here. The teaching on Paticca Samutpada is a key part, along with the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path. This is core to the understanding of the one vehicle, this chain of interbeing. And of course, this is common to all Buddhist schools. And for an image to help us reflect on how we quench those flames, there is again a beautiful simile in the Lotus Sutra from chapter 5, again, maybe a familiar one, the Dharma rain. This image, just like a great cloud that rains upon all the grasses, the trees, the shrubs and herbs, whose seeds are watered and which grow according to their capacities, that the Tathagata teaches the Dharma of one aspect and character. That is to say, the character of liberation, dispassion, the cessation of suffering. And for me, there is no other Dharma in deep ecology than this cultivation of a sense of interconnection. And what greater connection can we find, can we cultivate, than kinship, this feeling of metta, of love. And especially, as we have been seeing in action, and as speakers have already shared, a true love, one that also resonates with another's suffering, contains compassion, but knows the way to freedom from that suffering. It is a wise compassion. It rejoices in fundamental virtue, not getting caught in grasping at views, seeing the virtue in another, even if the images, the metaphors that they use are different to our own. And it's an inclusive love, one that has this dimension of acceptance, because it's penetrating to the ultimate underlying unity of all of our experience. And of course, again, the Pali Canon does not let us down. Just as a mother protects her only child, so should one cultivate a boundless heart towards all beings, above, below, across, without obstruction, without hatred. So as we conclude, even the best raft gets us nowhere unless we paddle, of course, yeah? So I'd like us to just enjoy, in conclusion, just a brief meditation, if you would like to join me. This cultivation of loving kindness, we've already had beautiful opportunities to dip in, to taste, and it is the returning that makes that path clear. So I invite you to reflect on that practice of metta that begins with cultivation of loving kindness towards none other than ourselves. We can connect again, finding our way back to some of that ease and calm through perhaps the breath in the body. And we can know that this is an anchor for us, an island, a refuge. We can always return to this if this meditation, or indeed any experience, becomes overwhelming or even abstracted. We can come back to that embodied awareness. And we continue by giving rise to an awareness centered in the heart space. Giving ourselves, offering ourselves this first gift of kindness, of stopping, resting. And if we find it helpful, we can literally imagine ourselves as a child, vulnerable, subject to the ups and downs of life, worthy of care, and now receiving that care. We can directly share in the benefit of that wish, embracing ourselves with this light and warmth of loving kindness. And then we can slowly, based on that foundation, extend that same feeling towards another being in our imagination, perhaps someone dear to us, someone we would normally include in the circle of our love, our kin. A wise love not clouded by attachment, not seeking something in return, connecting to a feeling in the heart maybe as it softens and deepens a little. But again, we do not stop there. We explore possibility to extend loving kindness towards someone that we maybe only know a little, maybe just meet them from time to time, a neighbor, someone in our street, someone who catches the same bus. But we recognize in this person also, as in ourselves and in a dear being, someone who is vulnerable, subject to ups and downs, worthy of a mother's care and receiving it now, benefiting from that embrace. Even as we benefit from this same calm and ease in our own body. And we can wish for them that same freedom that we would wish for ourselves or a dear one, that they be free from pain and suffering, free from anger, enmity, that they carry themselves, body and mind, all in happiness. Including them in the circle of our care, our friendliness. And again, not stopping there. Continuing to break down the barriers that might normally, habitually limit the extent of our circle of care, kinship. And we can imagine a difficult being. Perhaps not the most difficult being we can think of. Maybe a 4 or 5 out of 10 is plenty to begin. But we can see also their vulnerability, their humanity, their very human wish just to be happy, to be free from pain and suffering, just like us. Again, tasting, even as we offer this to another, the same benefit in the ease that we experience in body and mind. And as we conclude, finally, having established ourselves in this cultivation, this step-by-step blooming of love in the heart, we can experiment with extending that light and warmth, perhaps beyond just this body, out into the space we share here, for example, encountering, even in this room, beings human and other than human, some known to us, dear to us, and even beyond, out into this neighborhood, this landscape, encountering many beings. And perhaps we can begin to feel into the way that we are just one strand in a vast web of interconnection, of interdependence, of interbeing. Just a drop in the ocean of life. So many other beings supporting us in countless hidden ways. Can we recognize and accept that their unskillfulness that may manifest from time to time comes from causes and conditions, that its root lies in suffering and its cure lies in wisdom? Anchored in our heart space, maybe beginning to feel this sprouting of a feeling of unlimited kinship, this fundamental connection, this shared vulnerability. Could these other beings also belong in the circle of our kinship, the circle of our love and care? Can we feel, along with that kindness, a compassion, acceptance, inclusivity? And we might even see in this process an echo of the way we offer loving kindness to ourselves. We also encounter parts of ourselves that are difficult, places that are tender, are painful, maybe even disliked by ourselves, also arising due to causes and conditions, worthy of care. And the wisdom of approaching even these parts of ourselves with compassion, with acceptance, with inclusivity. A place from which we can respond rather than react. A movement or a vehicle towards kinship. And maybe a healing of this illusion of separation from not only ourselves, but from this web of life that we are all part of. So thank you very much, dear friends. You may like to open your eyes if they are still closed. These are my words. If there is something that has been helpful, then it is thanks to not just my teachers, but to the Buddha. And something that is confusing or unhelpful is no doubt all of my own creation. So I hope you enjoy the rest of today, that we can continue to appreciate this amazing diversity that we have on offer and appreciate the energy, the diligence of Metta Center in bringing this kind of event together, and remembering to support as much as we can, knowing that this is offered completely free. So thanks again.